Want to stand, is that right?
Yeah.
First off, thank you so much for all the work that you do. So I think most folks know, I grew up down the street from here. I went to Cascade Middle School. My family actually went to the White Center Food Bank growing up as well. So it's near and dear to my heart. As you were talking, I just texted Joe McDermott to say, what the fuck is going on? And then I also talked to my staff about the funding that we partner with as well. So let's follow up afterwards to see what we can do to help find some space. I know that on the 16th Avenue there's some. What's interesting is that oftentimes when you look at our legislative process, people will say, well, I'm King County, I'm Seattle, I'm the state. Nobody cares. Like, you're all taxpayers, and we all talk to each other, so let's make sure that we do the work together as well. So I'll make sure I follow up. Technically, it's not my jurisdiction, but it doesn't matter. They all have cell phones, so I can call them. And they all need state money anyway, so that's fine. It's been an honor and a pleasure to be able to serve the people on the 34th, and I'm so lucky to have your support. I don't know if you remember this. So the first day I went door knocking.
No, he knows where I live.
Yeah. So I chose the first place to go door knocking was in the Greenbridge area, and I think your door was like number 3. It was
I
a good
gave
door.
him the quiz of the year.
Yes, it was good. And Officer Trung is a longtime family friend as well. Thank you. Good to see you. Hugo was fantastic. So it's an honor to be able to be in the community that gave me so much, and the opportunity to serve here is nothing short of a privilege. And that's why I wanted to make sure that I show up to be accountable to the folks here, because you are my family, you are my friends, you are the people that I grew up like. This is my librarian. Not joking around. Wendell. What's funny, whenever I have an event in White Center, Wendell's always delivering.
Rolling right up in my mouth.
Yeah. People are like, oh, what's going on? What's the guy talking to you? I'm like, no, he's just my friend. But it was a fantastic year, I think, for folks that were more progressive. So this is the first year that the Senate has had such a strong majority, and it really showed. So one of the interesting things that I found out when I went down there is that oftentimes people think of politics as being right or wrong or good or bad. That's actually not the case. It's more fundamental than that. It's making sure that your issues are being heard in the first place, right? So in the legislature, about 4,000 bills get introduced in any given year. On average, about 200 or 300 actually get passed. And this year it was good. We actually passed about 428 bills, which was fantastic. But less than 10% of bills actually get passed that are introduced. And when you're from a community that has oftentimes been overlooked, oftentimes has had investments either mismanaged or not done at all, oftentimes your schools have been kind of underfunded, and you're not at the table, you don't get these resources. Does that sound familiar?
Yes.
It sounds familiar to me. And that's one of the things that we really fought hard for in this past cycle. Not just in legislation that we believe would impact the families that are here, but also in the funding. So this happened to be a budget year in Washington State. Every other year is a budget year. We were able to get $47 million in funding specifically for the 34th, largely in this area, which I didn't look up historically, but I'm going to guess that hasn't really been the fact in the past as well. So everything from helping to fund the finishing of 4th Avenue. We did look into the hub stuff as well, so I think you do have a few years associated with that. Because they're still very much in the planning. I know they don't have the money for it. They don't have the permits, so you have some time. We spent about $26 million to do some renovations at South Seattle Community College. We also were able to secure, Marty's in the back, $2 million to finish off the capital project for the Burien Marriott. Folks can go down in the lobby. It's not like it's a done deal. Like Marty was down there, other folks were down there. You really have to fight for everything that you get. And if you don't have legislators that pay attention, who don't show up, you will get screwed. It's just a fact. And I think we've seen that potential in the past, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to run for office. And I think it's also one of the reasons why I'm probably more aggressive than everybody. So, you know, and like I think oftentimes too is folks sometimes when they get down there, they're getting down there to get reelected, to stand there to see. I actually don't care if I get reelected. The biggest thing for me is making sure that other people feel empowered to run for office, so we can get more good people there. So that way, it doesn't matter if I get reelected or not. We already have good people. So that's actually my goal, and that's kind of one of the things I probably ask for from this community is helping with either registration of folks, being more engaged in terms of running for office yourself, participating in civic engagement. One of the biggest things we can do is physically go down the lobby if that's potentially a possibility, because that does actually move the needle. So that's kind of my spiel. I can talk a little bit about some of the policies that we passed. What's funny is people don't actually care about policies so much as like how the legislature as a whole is doing. We did some very transformative things, specifically for this area, but also I think things that would impact this community. One of the biggest things for me is education and access to education. And oftentimes in the United States, it's a barrier. So if you're from a poor community who you don't have the same access to somebody else that has gotten their way in through other means, it's hard for you to go to school. So in Washington State, we actually have funded what's called the Washington State LEAD Grant, which is now called the Washington Promise Scholarship. So if your family qualifies, so basically if your family makes under $50,000 a year and you want to go to a public college, your tuition is covered, period. If your family makes under $90,000 a year, it is partially covered. We also passed the First in the Nation Long-Term Trust. Basically, a percentage of your salary will now go into a fund that will help you pay for long-term care, which won't necessarily be enough to fund everything, but it's going to be a good chunk to get people through those pieces as well. We try to make things a little bit more progressive in terms of tax structure. I think, especially in this community where you don't you get overburdened by taxes. We're trying to move away from property taxes and sales taxes and do other things like B&O, like REIT. REIT is a real estate excise tax. So we were able to lower the real estate excise tax for 80% of people, kept it the same for 18% of people, and then raised it a nominal amount for 2%. So what that means is if your property is worth under 1.2 million, you got a tax cut. If it's worth up to 3 million, it's the same. If you have property over 3 million, congratulations, you're still rich. So I think everybody's in that situation.
And that is basically when the house sells, is that?
Yeah, so it's only when the house sells. And oftentimes the only properties that would be impacted are multi-million-dollar properties. They had some arguments that were against it.
But mainly people in Medina.
Mainly people in Medina, but also, yeah, so largely it's like land speculators also as well. They'll buy property for a lot of money, develop it, flip it. And then they were like, oh, this is gonna mess up our financial models. I'm like, yeah. So, yeah, it was good. So we also did a whole host of things. Me personally, for this district, transportation is very important. I sit on the transportation committee. So making sure that we were getting the resources for this area. Roundabouts actually did come up. And actually, when that first roundabout came about, I was like, this doesn't look like the roundabouts in West Seattle.
They don't.
Yeah, like what the heck?
Highland Parks are different.
Yeah, Highland Parks can be different too. So, but literally, I just texted Joey, has to take that.
No, but no, I went down there and I looked at it, and that's how I knew that there was something wrong with the roundabout.
Well, even for like logistics, they have like flowers and stuff like that, so you can tell that they're there. Like, I would totally drive right over.
No, they're supposed to have the fire trucks and metro buses to drive over. But if you look at that one, there at the food bank, it's way too high, and
I'll be candid with you. So the first thing I noticed when I was down there was just rampant mediocrity. So when we say right, so it's like, and like I'll probably get in trouble, and that's fine. But like when you go down there, these are regular people. And this is a part-time legislature. So not only regular people, there are regular people that are sometimes stretched very thin as well. It is not easy to be in Olympia, especially if you live in an area that has rapid growth in terms of affordability as well. So when you go down there and you say like, I can't believe this is a thing, I can, because I've seen people that are down there. And that's why, again, it's important to have your voice there, because if you're not, laws and bills will still get passed. They may not be how you want them. There were a couple situations where I was sitting on a negotiation, and there were some ideas that were raised, and I was like, that is objectively a dumb idea. Like that, like it was technology. So I happen to work at Microsoft. It's sad, but it's true. I'm actually the foremost expert in technology in the entire legislature, which is very scary. And my nickname in Olympia, if you don't know, is Senator LegTech. LegTech is the IT department in Olympia. So on multiple occasions on the Senate floor, people will say, hey, I can't get my email to work. And then I'll say, oh, that's racist, you're asking the young Asian guy. and then I'll say, yeah, this you just gotta press this button. But I was sitting on a negotiation with a bill, and oftentimes lobbyists that are down there, they're not there to pass good policy, they're there to benefit their clients. So he was trying to pass an amendment to a bill that I was working on that, like, just technologically speaking, didn't make any sense. And if I wasn't there to speak up, I think it would have passed. So that happens way more often than you think. So being engaged in your legislature, in your city councils, in your King County councils, is a lot more important than you think. And the more germane it is to your area, the more important it actually is. Like the sewer districts, like all those folks, they should be, you should be in their ear. Because I will tell you, in the 34th, we have Vashon, Maury Allen, we have West Seattle, we have White Center, Marion. Who do you think is the loudest?
West Seattle.
West Seattle and Vashon and Maury Allen.
Yeah.
Who are also the wealthiest people? West Seattle, Maury Allen, Vashon Island. So if you don't do it, somebody else is doing it.
There's a lot of political pull, at least in West Seattle.
We're moving it south.
Yeah, I know, we appreciate that, we respect that.
Carmela's down Arbor Heights, Teresa Mosqueda's moving down this way, Lerna Gonzalez moving down this way. But you're right, historically that has been the case, and I think folks.
Well, that's why they're getting a tunnel on Sound Transit
to the
West
folks
Seattle.
on the Sound Transit border.
Right.
I love it. It's fine. We're good now. So those are some of the things that we did. I mean, there's like literally 428 bills. I'm not gonna go through all of them. Some of the things that I was very proud of, I came down there. I think you guys came to meetings where I was at. You know that equity and social justice are very big things for me. So we passed a lot of justice reform issues. I personally don't support a youth jail, nor do I support youth detention. I know that there's law enforcement here. I appreciate all the work that you're doing. That was not a slight by any means, but we passed legislation that would make it, so Washington State is one of the leading states for youth detention, for a couple of reasons. Largely it was a remnant of the DACA bill. We've amended and fixed that, so that way we don't use that as a crutch as much as we should. We did a lot of stuff on reform for marijuana convictions as well. So I'm not advocating for more marijuana shops, I'm just saying if you're got a conviction for things that were now legal, that shouldn't be on your record because it impacts things like education, funding for, getting an apartment, even hanging out with your kids.
Joe, I have a question about
Yeah.
that. Does that law that you passed, does it get rid of the conviction history for adults and minors?
It's 20, so you have to be 21 at the time.
What was
that it
the
passed.
thinking?
Oh, that was the initiative. So initiative 502, when it was passed, that was what was passed. So we were mirroring what that was. So basically, if you're allowed to consume at that time, then your conviction should also be vacated at that time.
What if you were younger than that? Then
I
you're
know,
stuck
I
with
know,
it?
but the Republicans. So there's a few law and justice Democrats as well that made it harder to pass. So.
Joe, is that also including federal reservations in this state?
The entire state. Yeah. So I'm working on some other things to go more, I think, to what, thank you for bringing that up, by the way. I actually met with the governor today, which is weird. Last year, I don't think he knew, obviously he knew who I was. And I don't think most people did. And now, like, he randomly called me to do a one-on-one meeting, which I don't think is normal. But it was great. We talked about that, some other things as well. So he wanted to know what next steps were. But for me, I think our justice system can use a little bit of fixing. It's not necessarily fair for a lot of folks, and we're trying to undo that one bill at a time. And also, in terms of just our youth, making sure that we have the support for them, whether it's through education and whatnot as well. Orcas, you guys care about orcas? A lot of people do care about orcas. I care about orcas. So we've raised about $900 million in investments towards supporting orcas and their habitats to make sure that hopefully they have enough food to be able to subsist. There's a whole orca task force. It's a very in-depth bill. You can learn more if you want.
Does that go into Washington fisheries as well?
What do you mean?
In terms of using the the cat.
Oh,
that's
yeah,
necessary
so
to
that's
make-
actually a Department of Fish and Wildlife discussion, so that didn't require, legislation, that required some partnerships with that department. So I'm not sure what they went to in terms of, the actual numbers, but I know that was adjusted.
Nobody's talking about the seals.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think there are more systemic things as well. So I don't know if folks know, but seals eat Chinook salmon, and Chinook salmon is what the orcas eat. So,
Some workers eat seals.
yeah, exactly.
Well, sea lions though are a little bit tougher.
Yeah.
Tougher to fight.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole host of, that is, I personally don't like killing things, so that's a whole host of issues as well. I think there's ways to increase the salmon supply without necessarily, using lethal methods to adjust the supply. Ferries were pretty important. This is not the community for that, but we were able to advocate for, funding for ferries. Vigor actually is in this district, so the people who built the ferries are actually from this district. Not that I'm biased, but we made sure that we got some more funding for ferries because it's important for us. That's also kind of an interesting story about representation, where I was fairly passionate about getting more funding for ferries because there's a whole group of people on Vashon that if not for the ferries, they wouldn't be able to get around. And there was not much excitement for ferries. I will tell you that.
Yeah.
Especially when they're like, it's $188 million.
Yeah.
But
So-
that's our liquid highway.
It is our marine highways, what we
It is,
call it.
yeah.
Yes. And it actually is important. It's part of our ecosystem, it's part of our society, it's part of the fabric of Washington State. So we were able to get funding for that in a way that I felt was equitable and extended the contract to 5 boats. That was actually a really tough fight. So I'm gonna bring that up just because that's actually a bigger deal than I think most people realize. $188 million is a lot of money to come up with, and not many people wanna do it.
It should. The ferry system is one of the most renowned ferry systems in the world.
In the world, yeah.
And a lot of, one way to help support that funding is to emphasize the tourism that it could drive. Just this ferry system alone, I know a soccer writer from Philadelphia that he comes out here, not to the new Sounders, he comes out here to ride the ferry system.
You have who Hugo is by the what's your official title now?
Economic Development Program Manager for unincorporated King County Local Services.
Yeah.
Also grew up here in White Center. She was also my librarian.
Yeah.
I still have a bow tie that she did a bow tie and a $1 bill. In good shape, and I still have that.
In concert with your, building the political, strength of people
Yeah.
in general, so that you don't have to be reelected necessarily for things
Yeah.
to go well. Don't steal Hugo until
I'll
he
retry.
has a chance to make a positive.
I got his brother. I got his brother going. I got his brother going. He goes next. So yeah, hurry up, whatever you wanna do. But yeah, I mean, like, so we were to get, $47 million for this district specifically. I think we passed a lot of progressive legislation that really supports the communities here and the needs here. I cannot begin to tell you how important it is for you to advocate, especially when it comes to budget years. Because there's a lot of folks that come down, and there are, like, Mayor's Place, fantastic job. Copy what they're doing. Just do what Mayor's Place is doing, because that is like the model for what we need in our legislature, to have people who care about the community, who are connected to the community, coming down, talking about what we can do to actually solve problems, and then doing it. So I expect you to come down next year, asking questions, figuring out how we can support. We're supposed to come down?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
February.
I know, isn't that crazy? I still made it down. My apartment had no power, so I just slept in the dark. It was like camping. Yeah.
So the
But no,
budget's
It's
on
good when
hold.
you're young.
budgets are in odd years, and we have supplemental, so it's not gonna be the same level, but there's ways to make adjustments. So I think we can maybe sneak some things in to figure out what that might look like as well. Yeah.
For people that can't get down to Olympia,
Yeah.
what's the most effective way for citizens to let the legislators know?
Yeah, email and call. So my office specifically, we're very passionate about engagement, especially young people and communities that historically have been underrepresented. And we do this in a way that I think is inclusive, but also in the Senate, you're allowed to have remote testimony as well. So you can send in stuff for committee. And I can totally help explain how this process works. So this process is not an inclusive process. The process of legislating is not for young people or people of color or people with kids. people that have jobs during the day. So basically anybody, besides like upper class wealthy folks.
Yeah.
So it is not easy, exactly for the reasons that you're calling out. It requires more legislators who are proactive, who come out to meetings on, what day is it today? Thursday?
Yes.
8 o'clock at night, because it's important for you to have people who actually care and show up. I am personally sick and tired of politicians who sit there in seats and call themselves Democrats, but they don't do any work. So, those are some of the folks that we're also not, I don't know, partnering with, but working towards transitioning. And I'm not afraid of running against other Democrats, which I think folks here. Did you have another question? Sorry. Okay. But yeah, so I think if you can reach out to my office to stay engaged, that'd be one of the biggest things. But emails are easy, phone calls are easy. Honestly, calling them out on social media is probably the most effective. Because
Two biggest things. One is, this awful, terrible, decade-long school funding.
Yeah, the third me?
Right.
Yeah.
Is there hope for the school system to have a understanding of a stable,
Yeah.
predictable, set of funding? I mean, this, between last session and this one, last budget, I guess, and this one, was nasty, turn of events, I guess.
So we were able to pass the school levy lid that allowed folks in certain school districts to kind of adjust a little bit. The issue is that you have 240 or so different school districts, and they're all funded in different ways. The legislature goes in. That's going to require a lot of partnerships with the teachers unions.
Right, but it's been, I mean, it's been long before your time.
Oh yeah, yeah.
The
Oh yeah,
legislature-
you blame me on
for
you. It's
them-
not my fault.
For them to have, you know, attempted to make that happen, and it always seems to happen at the last minute when everybody's in crisis, and that's
That's
a
also an
shame.
excuse. So I've noticed that for folks who don't want to actually do stuff, pretend like they are, they'll wait till the last minute and then pretend like they're working. It's like, I tried and it failed. I'm like, well, you could also have done it 2 months ago, right? So systemically, your question is, how do we have a more progressive tax structure that actually invests in the things that we care about, like education, which is actually constitutionally protected? So one of the ways is the capital gains that we've discussed, potentially fund education. The hard part is, from a legal and a political perspective, is difficult. So you might have to fund capital gains to do other things, hopefully shuffle around money to then go back towards education. So largely, it's gonna be progressive tax reform.
Well, there's other pots that the legislature has, regularly rated, including this year, from what I understand, the, I don't know the formal name for it, but it's the utility revolving fund.
Yes and no. I mean, I used to think that too, where it's like, oh, this money was supposed to be for this, and it didn't go that way.
Well, my local utility needs that.
Yeah.
And it has not been available.
So let me know. So let's follow up. That one's a
Okay.
bit more unique, but
And, yeah, so I can talk about it.
yeah. Let's follow up afterwards.
The other big deal for me is the disconnect between the state's concept of what's, fair and just in marijuana store distribution and our counties.
Oh yeah, I just had a huge conversation about that today. I think I
And all you need to know about King County and, the unfair and terrible governance
Do a lot of
of
action.
marijuana stores is that there's no marijuana stores east of Rainier Avenue.
Yeah. No.
In unincorporated King County, the second largest municipality.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. We'll chat some more. I had a good conversation about that today. Let's go with you and then you.
Hi Senator,
Hey.
Carol and Pat, we live on Myers Way, so do
Oh, awesome.
a lot of that stuff.
A passion house
But
swap.
very engaged, so looking forward to getting to know you. So 2 ideas, short buses for the roundabout maybe, for a while, or widen the road, that would be one thing.
Oh yeah. No.
I mean,
I'm
I
very-
don't know.
Widen the road.
Okay,
Yeah,
that was just a quick.
No,
I
they just
didn't-
built
Tear
it.
the roundabout.
Okay, I didn't know exactly how it
Thanks
worked.
so much. Yeah.
Anyway, and on the school thing, is there any thought to looking at, unifying how, like, let's say this district pays their superintendent this much money, you know, way more than any other, you know, sort of like a CEO salary cap or something. Is there any, talk or thought about unifying that and making that sort of like, okay, we have a standardized way to apply this to.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard part, right? So like, I support a
Percentage or
teachers
something.
union, my wife is a public school teacher.
Mhm.
I will leave the compensation conversations with them.
Sure.
But we certainly should be having that dialogue about what is equitable.
Because people ask, what are the people that aren't teaching getting,
Correct.
and then
And
there's
usually
always
six
that.
figures and teachers themselves, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I see see what you're saying, but I think that's a conversation.
Just one little different way to look at it.
Yeah, but I think it's fundamentally unfunded though.
Yep, that too.
My question is, you're not below 9, you went to Highline, right?
I went to Kennedy, actually.
Okay, excuse me.
That's not my fault, because they were districts. I was supposed to go to Evergreen, and got moved over.
Okay.
You missed out.
Evergreen High School is in desperate needs to be totally replaced.
Yeah, so the levy discussions are happening right now. We've identified a person that I think is gonna run the levy, most people here know who that is.
And it does need state funding,
Yep.
because this district will not be able to.
Oh, I got you.
support it.
Yeah, no, I'm very passionate about that piece as well. So we were talking to the superintendent, talking to the person who I think is gonna run the levy initiative, and that's gonna be one of our priorities as well. Because the levy's actually gonna include, do you know, Evergreen's one, and there's a couple other schools in the same levy as well.
Yeah, it's Evergreen,
Question mark.
Highline, no, Highline's already got there, they're gonna.
Is there a Des Moines one?
Yeah, there's a couple.
I
I,
think.
There's a few schools.
Evergreen was in the district, so I just cared about that.
Senator Palumbo just took.
Yeah.
Is there gonna be, do you think the Senate or the legislature is gonna address that issue?
Oh, we are. So for folks who don't know, that's kind of unique. Senator Palumbo was from the first district, and he left. And it's kind of controversial because he left to be a lobbyist for Amazon, which is like, what are you doing? Which is totally legal. But he has family situations. We actually chatted last night about it. I don't fault him for making that decision. But yeah, so that means the legislature is going to shift next year. It's going to shift, I think, a little bit more because there's some seats that are actually up for special election. So we'll see how that plays out. But the reason why that's important, I think that's why you answered the question, is Senator Palumbo is one of our more moderate members, one of our more conservative members of the Democratic Party. So a lot of things are held up, and oftentimes 1 or 2 votes is more than enough to make a difference. I think you're probably referring to capital gains or something, but
Well, and also a general issue, in a lot of states, there's a required cooling off period.
we don't have one, which is interesting. We also have a citizen legislature as well, which makes the dynamic more difficult. So there's a bill that Ruben Carl has been running for the past 5 years, that's supported by the AG's office, that I had to sign on to, where I do think that if you're a legislator, you shouldn't become a lobbyist right away. Like 1 year sounds right, 2 years sounds great, 1 year sounds great.
Raise the piggy bank and then
Yeah.
reward.
But at the same time, as a citizen legislator, like, it is, I mean, like, we make $47,000 a year, and if you live in West Seattle or Seattle, that's not enough. Yeah, exactly, like, we would be, so, and that's why we have the folks, that's why we have a lack of diversity, is because it's very expensive to run for office, and it's very expensive to legislate, and when we ran, so taking my legislator hat off, when I ran for office, we were out fundraised 5 to 1, and I had no support from anybody in the establishment except for Camilla Jaipal. But we still won. It's because I think the support from the community and the votes. So absent having a way around that, it becomes very, very difficult to have accurate representation. So to give you an idea, the state legislature and the Senate almost double the number of people of color. So we almost double the number of people of color in the Senate, which is fantastic. Yeah.
What was that number?
Now we have 8. But we also passed some of the most robust pieces of legislation for working class families. We also had a keen eye for tax equity. We had a keen eye for funding education, things that we cared about. So we don't need to overturn the whole system. The fact that we can get a few key people in the appropriate spaces and saying the things that should be said, I think is really does help move the needle. So I'm very lucky to work with some great new people.
Thank you for addressing non-compete agreements.
Oh, yeah,
Can
yeah.
you shed any light on that negotiation, salary limit, and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff?
that was a fun one. So I love all these bills, and I actually love the policy side. So non-competes, if you work in Washington, your employer is allowed to say you can't work for somebody else. And what's interesting is that people think that it's a tech thing. McDonald's does it. Like small mom and pop shops, not mom and pop shops, but like chains that employ small.
Beauty shops.
Yeah, stuff like that. Where like if you work at McDonald's and you wanted to work at either another McDonald's or a Burger King, you legally couldn't. They can sue you, which is basically indentured servitude for some people. And
It's in the contract.
yeah, it's in their contract. So we made it illegal to do that. I tried to make it more robust, but it got down to about $100,000. So if your salary is $100,000 or less, you're not subject to any non-competes. I try to have non-competes.
Is that any, across the board on any job? Or?
Everything.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
A nice little thing to go along with that is to have, something that they have, forced arbitration.
Oh, yeah. Forced arbitration is that you circumvent the court system, so you're not trial by your peers.
You agree to that before you start.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, which is
so
problematic.
you never know what kind of trouble is gonna come.
Yeah. Kind of on a tangent though, so one of the things we're working on for next year is portable benefits. So some of the reasons why people stay in jobs that may not necessarily be healthy for them, or they can't find another job, is because they're beholden to the healthcare or their 401k, which we all need. So I actually support a universal healthcare, but neither here nor there. So if you were able to have a portable health benefit where you can have your healthcare, have your 401k, be in a spot where you're not beholden to a specific company, you're more likely to be able to have mobility. And the reason why that's important is because economic mobility means having the freedom to move around. So if you're stuck in one spot because you have a kid that you need to take care of, that's a decision you have to make. But if you are able to make the decision that is best for your family and you have the benefits, you're more likely to have access to equitable wealth development.
Will that include matching, like the corporate matches and all that,
We don't know yet, so it's just in the planning phases right now. I mean, I wanna say yes, but
That'd
you
be
never know
nice.
until it gets signed.
Yep.
So what about I know we're getting money taken out of our checks now for the family leave.
I think it's like 0.05%.
Right, and that goes into effect, I think a lot of people aren't aware of that.
Oh, so paid, long-term care, we specifically wanted to work and support folks, that are nearing retirement. So basically, mathematically, it's great if you're over the age of 35 because you're gonna have more benefits than you pay into. And then for me, I'm happy to contribute to a better society.
Yeah.
But for instance, our paychecks, there'll be a small amount taken out, but then you'll be able to access a fund for long-term care. I think the cap is like $35,000, gotta double check. There's so many amendments that happen last second that can drastically change things. And I'm pretty sure that's correct. So you can put that towards things like nursing homes or at-home stays. So obviously it's not gonna be enough to cover for everything, but if you had a medical emergency where you needed to have a nurse come, if you had a family member that you needed to take care of in their final days or something like that, it'd help pay for some of those things. So you don't go bankrupt just trying to take care of your
But what about the family, for like, if you.
Oh, I'm sorry, you're talking about
FMLA.
paid family leave.
Yeah.
So that actually goes into effect pretty soon now. In the city of Seattle, they actually changes you can actually do for other things as well. Did you have a specific question, or is it just?
No,
gonna
is
go into
that
effect?
just if that's something that's done in the legislature this year? I mean, it's gonna go into effect next year,
Yeah.
but I've talked to a lot of people that have no idea that is something that's going.
It's a benefit for them.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I mean, so we now have paid family leave, which I think is very important, especially for young families. I think that's actually one of the most, so kind of on a tangent, is that we do a horrible job at talking about what we actually did. So, and we also do an even worse job in making sure that people that need the services are actually gonna get access to the services. And it takes a lot of effort to do it. If you notice, a lot of the ways that I communicate, for those who follow me online, is like, I literally just talk about the stuff that we're doing. And it's so crazy the responses I get. They're just like, you're changing this whole thing. I'm like, no, I'm not. I'm literally just talking about it on Facebook. And it's because nobody else is even acknowledging this exists. So that's a good point. I think there needs to be more awareness about what it means, kind of how it impacts people and what we can do for it. There's some things that I'm thinking about for other issues that I think needs to be mirrored with that too. So I don't have much more than, yes, we have a paid family leave and you should definitely use it if you need it.
It's not just for them having a newborn, it's adopted babies, adopted kids, it's a broader subject.
But it's also if you're ill, for illness, or if you have to take care of an elder parent, or, yeah.
It's really, it is needed.
Yeah, and also for grievance in the city of Seattle, the task ordinance where it's the beta billing.
And what about keeping people in homes, cause I feel like that connects, like, you're better off aging in place and,
Yeah.
so I don't know.
That's the long-term care.
Is that part of that?
Yeah, that's part of that.
That's
But even keeping people in homes, when we talk about affordability and homelessness issues, one of the things we did was boost the funding for social services. So for me, my goal next year is really focus on housing and homelessness issues to alleviate the problems that we're seeing right now very clearly. There are people working on it, don't get me wrong. I just don't understand why they don't talk to each other. So for me, I think one of the most important things that we did too was boost things. Say for instance, TANF, HENS, I'm not sure if folks know what that is, but that's
Yes.
essential needs programs for seniors and whatnot. It is 3 times cheaper to keep somebody housed than it is to take them out of homelessness. So it's like, instead of spending all this money after they become homeless, why don't you just invest it? And like, it's way cheaper, everybody's happy and they're housed. So I know that's not what we were really asking, but that's actually focused for next year.
Part of it, yeah.
Yeah, everything's connected.
Yes, Joe, I've got one quick question.
Liz, you never have one quick question.
That's probably true. So, equity and social justice, they're very important.
Yeah.
But they start at home.
Yeah.
And I'm concerned that the healthiest neighborhoods in this county at least, or probably this state, probably this country, are white, wealthy neighborhoods.
Yeah, that's
They
just
tend to
fact.
be.
Yeah.
And low-income housing is, it's like White Center. If you look at White Center, the number of bedrooms for low-income people, which are very needed all over,
It's highly concentrated here,
highly
Yeah.
concentrated.
without the resources or the tax money to come with it.
That's right, because they're tax exempt.
Yeah. Well, more than that too, but yeah. So in addition to that, like literally investments made in South King County, specifically this area, and like in parts of Berrien, you are like, there's inequity in distribution of how those funds are being spent.
So, is there something you can do? We've been working on trying to get an opportunity analysis of the state and the county. Now, the CDA is working with the Communities of Opportunity, which is greatly funded by King County and, what's the other organization?
Seattle Foundation.
Seattle Foundation. And they're not interested in integration. They're very focused on investing in a place and bringing more and more housing to that place, which happens to be White Center.
Yeah.
So I think it would be helpful if you would look at that issue.
Yeah.
And because everyone needs homes, and I'm sure there should be affordable housing in West Seattle, right?
Well, in Laurelhurst.
Yeah,
Yeah.
there's lots of
Hard.
places that are healthy,
Yeah. No, I
healthier than
agree.
we are.
No, I agree, and it is very clear which areas have well-funded lawyers and which areas don't. Yeah, and politicians, yeah. So no, I mean, one of the things that we did, which is not popular for everybody, was try to make it easier to have density not in areas that are already overburdened. And there was certainly a fight on that as well. And I think that's one of the ways is right now, legally, it is tough to build in other areas, but for some reason it's easier here. So if we made that a bit more feasible, we can alleviate some of the pressure as well. So it's kind of a micro and macro outlook on it, but that is certainly one of the things that we're looking at from a housing and development perspective, and how do you do it in an equitable way.
Hopefully, in the next federal administration, we'll have someone who goes back to President Obama's thoughts, where fair housing was important.
Yeah, well, it'd be great to have a HUD chair that.
There you go.
Yeah.
And a livable wage, right?
Oh, yeah.
That would be the
Yeah.
best place to start.
Well, I think establishing a right for everyone to have the right to live in a vibrant, mixed income
Yeah.
community would be a first step towards a kind of equity that when we talk about individuals, we miss the larger picture. Therefore.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things there. I don't want to take up too much more time.
I hate to do this,
But-
yeah, we need to
Yeah,
cut
we
it
gotta move
short.
on. Thank you so much. I'll hang up back here for a second.